G'day trendsetters, here's something new. This is a video log or a diary about my activities, which concerns my practice of Chana-yu, the Japanese tea ceremony, what I'm thinking about in relation to my practice, where I want to take it into the future, the inspirations that I draw from in order to create a practice that's relevant to my time and culture, and also where the fundamentals of that practice comes from, i.e. Great masters like Sen Rikyu, Furuta Oribe, Ueda Soko, Kobori Enshu, these guys, which I take the writings concerning them and the writings that they've left behind themselves and translate them, write commentaries on them and essays, and offer those that work through my Patreon and also publishing as I go along. So this is to give you a good direct glimpse of what's going on. Patreon have added a new function where you can sign up and be a member, unpaid member. So you get any blogs that I do like this, whether it be written or video, whatever material I decide to put up open to the public, you'll get an email, a notification that it's out there, and you don't need to be concerned that you're going to miss anything if you're interested in my activities. As you'll see with this video, I'm going to be producing a lot more stuff that's going to be on the cutting edge of tea culture. So Rene Char loved where I am, Forcalquier, which is a town about 1 hour, 1 hour and a bit from Marseille, and it's an old town called Forcalquier. Forc means kiln, can be like for a ceramic kiln or something large on an industrial scale. Calquier is calcium, I'm pretty sure, calc. So they were producing a lot of that raw material in the past, which got them very rich. They actually minted their own money in this town. Don't try and do that nowadays. And a vestige of the thriving period of Forcalquier are some gorgeous buildings and architecture, including Gothic architecture. There's a beautiful fountain in the Place Saint-Michel that has the gargoyles and stuff looking to spitting out water. There's a shaman festival on this weekend, which goes to show how open people are here and curious about the outside world, integrating those ideas into their own life, which is a little bit rare. You don't get to see much of that. It's quite conservative, most parts of France, so it's a nice little pocket hidden away down the south. I love it very much here, so looking forward to being here this weekend. Rene Char, as I mentioned, felt that his heart was quite contented to make a stop at Forcalquier, one of his quotes from one of his poems, and it's enshrined in a fountain here in the playground. And I just wanted to give you another piece of his poetry, because he's one of the big guns of surrealist poets and also French poets. A little excerpt of one of his poems called The Window Pane. I love you, twin mysteries. I feel you both. I have pain and I'm buoyant. So what the bloody hell have I been up to? As I mentioned, there's a new feature of Patreon where you can be an unpaid member and get all my updates for free, which is like blogs, writings, musings, videos, whatever I choose to put out there for free. So I'm upping the ante on my output in terms of my own thoughts now that I've been gestating my own thinking towards Chana-yu and the Re philosophy and practice for many, many years. So now it's time to put out those ideas a little bit more. I feel more comfortable with sharing them freely. So please hop on and enjoy the ride. Another thing is the 6th of August is the anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Also the 9th was Nagasaki, and don't forget the many other hundreds of bombings across Japan and the war in itself all across the world. Like, damn, it's a terrible thing. But unleashing nuclear technology on human beings is quite a significant point in history, so that's why I choose to mark that. And also it's very dear to my heart because I lived in Hiroshima for many years, and my tea practice, the Ueda Soko Ryu, developed in Hiroshima and is the only Hiroshima school of tea. So it's quite dear and close to me to remember that point of history and make sure that we can interpret it in a way that betters all humanity going forward, so we don't repeat the same errors. One of the characteristics of human beings is that we tend to forget our past, but there's some big lessons, and we have a big technology at our fingertips now, so we need to make some big decisions about what we do and what we choose to do or not to do going forward. That's there, it's free content. My thoughts on Hiroshima this year and the temai that I devised for that is a unique temai, unique tea ceremony that I devised based on one of the memories that I have my sensei told me about her hardship after the war. So please check that out if you wish. Another thing in our Shachu is a group, a formal group under the hierarchy of the Ueda Soka Ryu. My Shachu is called Somu Shachu, Somu being my tea name. We started an advanced Keiko this month. So we have an anchors group, sort of democratizing the way that we run things rather than just be a pyramid structure under me. And we've morphed that, now that we've got some of the admin things out of the way, into an active practice where I practice and people can learn on how I interpret tea for my surrounds, i.e. In Marseille, the people I need to communicate tea to, and how we take the traditional forms of the temai and make them into forms that we can communicate more to other people's hearts in our time and area. So we're looking at kinin datte. Kinin is a person of nobility, so we basically never get to serve tea to a person of nobility these days. So in case we do get to serve tea to King Charles III or something, well, it's best to know it. But what do we do? And when we practice this and we have no reason to do it? Well, one of the philosophies behind it is kinin, which is a metaphor for the Buddha. And there's the scroll, Buji Kore Kinin, which means to have no thing or non-attachment is the Buddha. So how does that fit in with the kinin datte? And how can we take our attachment to the regalia that we use, all the stands and stuff, and pare it down and serve tea to another person as if they have some inherent Buddha nature, if you will, that we can unite through in the tea room? Is a meditation that we pursued this month at Keiko, and I'll have some footage of that to show on my Patreon and also openly. So watch out for that coming soon. Also, what I'm thinking about is Virgil Abloh, who passed away sadly at a young age, his early 40s, just a couple of years ago. Virgil Abloh, absolute dynamic force in the fashion and cultural world that we operate in. He was the head designer at Louis Vuitton just before he passed away. And in the years before his death, he left us a huge outpouring of his thought in all the discussions that he was having during the pandemic with different fashion groups and fashion schools and universities, and coaching people and just putting his ideas out there. And it's a great source of my inspiration of where I want to take the Japanese tea ceremony in my own practice and communicate it to people throughout the world. One of the things he says around the 47-minute mark of a coaching call with some of the Louis Vuitton graduates or something like that, I'll put the link there for you to check it out. He's asked about what the future of fashion is going to look like. And he basically describes the tea ceremony of Chaniyu. So he's talking about that you have disparate cultural influences that need to come together in one thing, i.e. a fashion show, and there's a storytelling about all the inspiration that's going into that collection. Through that, he wants to empower people from different cultures to become like their own version of Ralph Lauren or Martin Margiela, these iconic designers and icons who have left a lasting legacy with their vision, and for other people of different cultures, wherever it be, any culture around the world, to take that up and become their own version of that, drawing on their own influences. And so it's basically describing a point where we're at with Chaniyu, I think. And when he's unpacking this idea, he expresses his disillusionment with the state of the fashion world when he started to work in Paris. He thought it would all be like, all these artisans collaborating and bouncing ideas off each other, and had this very idealistic vision of what it was like. But it wasn't like that at all, and I can relate to that to the tea ceremony. So you think it's going to be all wabi-sabi and have these beautiful old wabi chashitsu that you get to practice tea in and all that, and kimono and all that lovely stuff that we see in the pictures and books. But when you actually practice it, there's heaps of stuff behind the practice that's not all about that. It's about working on yourself first and foremost, making sure that you have your cleaning down, and then these nuts and bolts of practice. And then when you get outside of these idealized environments at the home of tea schools, there's not many of these environments left, and now they're extremely expensive to build. So how do you interpret that in your own time and culture is the thing, and that's where the emphasis is. It's not like trying to get to that ideal stay there, which means moving to another country or something, or trying to rebuild that in your own country, which can be quite divorced from your surrounds and not connect people at their heart. But take those ideals and then reinterpret them for yourself and create something new, and keep the tea culture going or the fashion culture going. So what he's talking about there is highly relevant to tea, I think. And he also wanted us to use fashion shows as a means of storytelling, to communicate how this is all happening and the cultural soup that he's drawing from to put out a collection. And when you think about a chaji, we have the Tori Awase. We select all our items and curate them depending on a particular vision. It's usually seasonal, but it can be something else of a deeper theme. We can also use our chaji or our tea gatherings as a form of storytelling as well. I've got to a point in my practice. I've been practicing tea since the year 2000. I've been teaching since 2007. And I've been translating and writing about tea in an academic way, research-based approach to bringing out the true vision of tea since 2015. So on top of all those stages of practicing and teaching and getting right into the heart of the matter, now I'm starting to get the confidence to share my ideas and my thinking more widely. So one of the things I want to do, like people will know that I already do the Tea Life Audio podcast, and that's a podcast where we just get together and have a casual chat about different themes and topics. But I wanted to do some deep dives, and I'm going to start my own individual podcast. Probably call it the Funk Wabi podcast if people don't stop me from calling it that. I want to come up with some deep dives, probably 10 minutes or so, into these topics like I was just talking about with Virgil Abloh and his ideas and how that relates to tea, and just go boom and give people something to think about, and then boom, drop another, and try and keep the momentum flowing, because there's so many things I'm touching upon in my research and practice that I want to capture them and share them to people, in case it helps you as well, because it's a long road, the path of tea. Most people are very silent, but I found some confidence and willingness to share, so here we go. What I did to prepare for all this is Simon Sinek is somebody I admire a lot. He's even more optimistic than I am. Wow. And he's developed a thing called finding your why, or your, in French, say, raison d'être, your reason for being. I wanted to make sure that I was really coming from my core before I projected some activities that are going to actually come from my heart. So I want to make sure that I was in tune with that before I started to put things out there. And what I found out through working with some very, very dear friends, it's been a huge time of introspection over the last 6 weeks, thinking about all the formative experiences of my life. That gives you a guide of the emotional connection that you have with those experiences as to where your value set is. But I come up with my dear friends of a statement which I think is where the core of my being is at, which is to embody and share Chani Yu practice as a path of truth. So that's the nutshell version, to embody and share Chani Yu practice as a path of truth. So hopefully my activities show that already, and hopefully my future activities will continue to be aligned with that reason for existing. In the Patreon space, stuff that the paid tiers get is I've just released another couple of tea tales. We've just released the last of the continuation of a series of tea tales that had to do with the famous chatsubo, the tea jars. And don't forget, the tea jars had the greatest value before chaite did, and now in the tea world probably chawans have the most value in the eyes of practitioners. But anyway, back in the day it was the chatsubo that did it. And we've had a series of those talking about the really famous ones. And the last one we talked about was how Murata Juko had one that he saw was particularly beautiful, which changed the way that the people of power, so Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was a retired shogun, had a lot of power in the art world that day, took up Murata Juko's ideas, and that sort of diffused them more widely into the population. His ideas about what embodies wabi, the philosophy of wabi in an object, and one of his chatsubo that reflected that. It still exists today. I'll put a picture on the photo. It's called Pine Blossom. From that last chatsubo one, we're going to move on now into a few tea tales that concern Murata Juko's anecdotes. Then a running thing I've been doing, one of the old manuscripts of the Ueda Soko Ryu, is called the Dew Path, or Roji Iri. It's written just after Ueda Soko passed away. It was written by the second Nomura Shihandai, so there was two families that were retainers of Ueda Soko's Chani Yu. One of those families was the Nomura. The second generation Nomura was Nomura Ensai, and he wrote a lot of stuff about Ueda Soko's practice. It's extremely close view at one of the early formative masters of tea, which we don't have a lot of. And he was alive when Ueda Soko was still alive. He served Ueda Soko as a page and learnt tea with him directly. So this glimpse is probably very close, almost unchanged from what Ueda Soko would have been doing in the Chashitsu. And remember, Ueda Soko was pretty faithful to Furuta Oribe, so this vision would also be a very close view of what Furuta Oribe was doing inside the Chashitsu. And he basically describes the flow of a chaji, both in the hearth season and the furrow season, and writes the details of the charcoal refresh, the sumidemai, also the kaiseki, what to do in the furrow season as opposed to when you're in the hearth season, the things that change, the way to prepare koicha, uscha, how to structure the garden and accommodate your guests depending on the heat. So it's extremely detailed view of the versions of chaji that were practiced in those days. So the next big chunk of that has just gone out to all my patrons. And one of the things that was very interesting, and this would definitely have come from Oribe, is when they're doing the sumidemai, they would raise their knee. So they get up in tatehiza, just one leg up, the left leg, and swing the kama over on the kettle over on the tatami. And when they did this with the brazier, it says to put your toes on the small board, the koita, and like putting a foot on dogu. And most people will be aware about how taboo feet are in Japanese culture. It's like you don't want to point your feet to something sacred, you don't want to point your feet in the direction of somebody else. And to put your foot on a piece of dogu was like, blew my mind. It's like if people did that these days, they'd be like kicked out of the chashitsu, like what are you doing? But it goes to show how formalized the practice has become these days as opposed to how it was in the past. So these sorts of things are hugely valuable insights to sort of release the pressure of all that formality that's imposed upon us these days, where we need to have our practice to keep up with the Joneses. But actually, better than the Joneses are people like Rikyu and Oribe, and I think that we need to look at how their practice was because it's more applicable on taking tea in different parts of the world. The real gutsy part of the Patreon at the moment is Furuta Oribe's tea records. The last one we did was concerning a trip that Oribe did after Rikyu told him that he needed to go and discover what the essence of ski is by looking at the Matsuyamas, that's a lacquer house in Nara. They had a collection of artworks including Murata Juko's legacy items, and one of the works that they had was a heron painting. And Rikyu thought that this was like the bee's knees of Wabi, and that everybody need to go and see this. His earnest students need to go and have a look at this to discover the real essence of ski. And so there's a detail about Oribe going off and participating in a chakai out there at Nara with this ink painting on display, and they're also using Juko's legacy chaire. So pretty damn cool. It gives you an idea about where the values are at and the pieces where they saw the beauty back in those days. Of course, there's these pieces still, well, the heron painting doesn't exist anymore, but the chaire still exists. So there's some pictures there if you want to go and see. And a huge commentary about the history of that painting was written by Joki, or Zhu Ji. He was a Chinese ink painter back in around 800, 900, the Song dynasty. Then another thing I started and have been working on, it's taking a lot of my time, is to get a new project going within my tea school. It's Wafu International, which is a magazine in English. It's the English version of our quarterly magazine. Now I can't translate the entire magazine, but I can do a bit, and I've cherry-picked the delicious parts, the oishi bits that I think are valuable to share with everybody practicing the Ueda Soko Ryu. And there are many members around the world that don't speak Japanese. There's a lot in Germany, and I have many students in different countries. To give them something, a token from the home of our school, I think is really nice. So I'm starting this project, and I've got one of the people in my shachu who's designing it. Thanks, pal, you're a bloody legend. And we've got something that's looking pretty nice and is with the school now, and so hopefully we can disseminate that in the not too distant future. Anyway, so I prepared that, and I'm thinking that it's probably a good idea after it gets released from our school that I will release it also through my paid tiers of my Patreon. And anyway, the material that I've produced to put into that, which includes Furuta Oribe's tea records, and for this, in the Patreon I do my own commentary on these tea records. It's very detailed and developed, but there's a brief commentary by one of the Japanese researcher's Kozu Asao. So I translate that and put that in that version. Also, the articles is Everyday Tea and Rice, which is an article by Fukuma Shihandai, or Fukuma Soshin, who's underneath the Grandmaster, the second highest ranked person in the Ueda Sokoryu. He writes about how to integrate formal tea practice with your everyday life. Then there's the article from our Iamoto. So he writes his own thoughts about some subject that he's contemplating at that particular point in time. And this one is about the G7 summit, and where he had the opportunity to serve tea to the spouses of the G7 heads of state. There's Ueda Soko's historical records. So our Grandmaster Ueda Soke picks historical records that related to the life of Ueda Soko to give a picture of what his life is like, the letters that he wrote or received himself. They're there. Also, the Mizuya talks written by another one of the highest ranked teachers in the Ueda Sokoryu named Mochizuki Sokaku. He writes an article about the Mizuya and how to run a Mizuya, the Mizuya protocol, which is really cool, called Mizuya Talk. And then he also does the Temai. So there's we're going through a revamp of all the Temai in the Ueda Sokoryu at the moment, getting rid of the Shingyo So versions, the legacies, things that sort of were added on, getting rid of those to bring it back more pared down to how it was in Oriben and Soko's day. So we're re-examining the Temai, and Mochizuki Sokaku looks at those and provides a Temai each edition too. So all of that's there. So as I mentioned at the start, there's a new feature. If you want to subscribe and get an email when these things come out, please do so. It'd be super excellent, because then I have more of a community to release stuff through. Releasing, no doubt, the podcast through the Patreon too. So you'll see that when the new episode is released. And if you want to do one of the paid subscriptions as well to get all the material I just talked about, well, you can consider one of those. Or if you want to check it out first, do the unpaid and then upgrade later. As you want, it's all there, heaps of options. Rock hard, have a nice day, and thanks very much for listening.